Security isn't a feature you bolt on at the end. It's not a checkbox you tick before deployment. It's a mindset. It's a fundamental part of building software responsibly. If you're a back-end developer, you are on the front lines of this battle, whether you realize it or not. You are the gatekeeper of the data, the systems, and ultimately, the trust your users place in your application. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of code and configurations, we must first internalize two foundational principles that should guide every decision you make. These principles are the bedrock upon which all other security practices are built. Ignoring them is like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. It's not a matter of if it will fall, but when. The first of these is the principle of least privilege. It sounds formal, but the idea is dead simple. Any user, program, or process should only have the bare minimum permissions necessary to perform its function. Think of it like giving out keys. You wouldn't give the janitor the key to the company's main financial vault, would you? They only need access to the closets and rooms they need to clean. In the digital world, this means your application's database user shouldn't have administrative rights if it only needs to read and write to specific tables. A user account for managing blog posts shouldn't have the ability to delete user accounts. By strictly limiting what each component can do, you dramatically reduce the potential damage if one of those components is compromised. Next up is the concept of defense in depth. The idea here is that you should never rely on a single security control to protect your system. One lock on the front door is good, but a lock, an alarm system, a deadbolt, and a guard dog are much better. In a back-end system, this translates to having multiple layered security measures. For example, you might have a web application firewall at the network edge, input validation in your application code, parameterized queries at the database layer, and encryption for the data at rest. If one layer fails, say a clever attacker bypasses your WF, the other layers are still in place to stop the attack. This layered approach creates a much more resilient and robust security posture, making an attacker's job significantly harder. Finally, we have the never trust user input mantra, which is a direct application of the secure by default principle. You must assume that any data coming from outside your system's trust boundary, whether from a user's browser, another API, or even an internal service, is potentially malicious. It's not about being paranoid, it's about being prepared. This means you must validate, sanitize, and encode all incoming data before you process it, store it, or display it back to another user. This single habit can prevent a massive range of vulnerabilities, from SQL injection to cross-site scripting. These principles, least privilege, defense in depth, and secure by default, are not just abstract concepts. They are practical, actionable guidelines that form the very core of secure backend development. Let's talk about the single most common source of security vulnerabilities: untrusted input. Every time your application accepts data from the outside world, you're opening a door. Your job is to be the bouncer at that door, checking IDs and making sure only the right people get in. This process is called input validation. It's the practice of ensuring that any data your application receives is in the format you expect, and nothing more. If you're expecting a numeric user ID, you should ensure the input is, in fact, a number. If you're expecting a date in a specific format, you validate that it matches that format precisely. This isn't just about preventing errors, it's about closing off attack vectors. One of the most infamous attacks that exploits a lack of input validation is SQL injection. This happens when an attacker manages to inject their own SQL commands into a query your application sends to the database. Imagine you have a login query that looks something like this. Select all from users where username equals username and password equals password. If an attacker enters or 1 as their username, the query becomes select all from users where username equals empty string or 1 equals 1 and password equals whatever. Because 1 equals 1 is always true, the database might return the first user in the table, often the administrator, and log the attacker in without a password. This is a catastrophic failure and it's entirely preventable. The gold standard for preventing SQL injection is not trying to cleverly sanitize or escape strings. The best and most reliable method is to use parameterized queries, also known as prepared statements. With this technique, you send the SQL query template to the database first, with placeholders for the user-supplied data. Then, separately, you send the actual data to fill in those placeholders. The database engine treats the query structure and the data as two completely separate things. It knows the data is just data, and will never interpret it as part of the SQL command itself. This completely neutralizes the threat of SQL injection, as the attacker's malicious string is never executed as code. Every modern programming language and database driver supports this, and there is no good reason not to use it. Beyond SQL injection, proper validation helps prevent a host of other issues. For example, cross-site scripting can occur if you take user input and display it on a web page without proper encoding. An attacker could submit a comment containing a malicious script, and that script would then run in the browser of any user who views that comment, potentially stealing their session cookies. The solution is to always treat output with the same suspicion as input. When you display user-supplied data in an HTML context, you must encode it to neutralize any special characters, like the less than and greater than symbols. This ensures the browser treats the data as plain text, not as executable code. Always validate on the server side. Even if you have client-side validation, a savvy user can easily bypass browser-based checks. Your application's data is its most valuable asset. It might contain personal user information, financial records, or proprietary business logic. Protecting this data is not optional in many parts of the world. It's a legal requirement with severe penalties for failure. The first step in data protection is understanding that data has two states: in transit and at rest. Both need to be secured. Encryption in transit protects data as it travels across a network, like from a user's browser to your server, or from your server to the database. The standard for this is Transport Layer Security, or TLS, the successor to SSL. Using HTTPS for all communication is non-negotiable. It prevents eavesdroppers from sniffing traffic and seeing sensitive information like passwords or session tokens in plain text. Encryption at rest protects data while it's stored on a disk in a database, or in backups. Even if an attacker gains physical access to your server or a database backup file, encrypted data will be useless to them without the decryption key. You should encrypt sensitive columns in your database, such as those containing personally identifiable information. Modern cloud providers and database systems make this relatively easy to implement, often offering transparent data encryption that handles the process automatically. Don't forget about backups. An unencrypted backup is a goldmine for an attacker. Ensure your backup and recovery procedures include strong encryption for all backup files. Of course, encryption is only as strong as the security of the keys used to perform it. This is where key management comes in. Storing encryption keys in a configuration file right next to your application code is a terrible idea. If an attacker compromises your code repository, they get the keys to the kingdom. Instead, you must use a dedicated secure key management service like AWS KMS, Azure Key Vault, or HashiCorp Vault. These services are specifically designed to securely store, manage, and rotate cryptographic keys. Your application can then request keys from the key management service at runtime, often using secure, role-based access permissions. This separates your code from your secrets, adding a critical layer of security. Finally, let's talk about credential management and data backups. Never ever hardcode passwords, API keys, or database connection strings directly in your source code. This is a common mistake that leads to countless breaches when code is accidentally made public. Use environment variables, or even better, a secrets management tool to inject these credentials into your application at runtime. And while encryption is crucial, a robust backup strategy is your ultimate safety net. Regularly back up your data and, just as importantly, regularly test your restore process. A backup you can't restore is worthless. Your backup plan should ensure that you can recover from a catastrophic event, whether it's a ransomware attack, hardware failure, or accidental data deletion with minimal data loss. Section 4. Who goes there? Authentication and access control. Authentication is the process of verifying that someone is who they claim to be. It's really the front door to your application. If this process is weak, nothing else matters. The cornerstone of strong authentication has long been the password. But we all know how problematic passwords can be. Users choose weak, easily guessable passwords, and they reuse them across multiple sites. As a developer, you have a responsibility to enforce good password hygiene. This means setting minimum length requirements. 12 characters is a good modern baseline. Checking passwords against lists of known breached passwords, like the one from have I been PW'd, and, most importantly, never ever storing passwords in plain text. When a user gives you their password, you must hash it using a strong, slow, and salted hashing algorithm. Algorithms like Argon 2, which is currently the industry best practice, Script or bcrypt, are designed to be computationally expensive, making them resistant to brute force attacks. Salting means adding a unique random string to each password before hashing it. This ensures that even if two users have the same password, their stored hashes will be completely different, preventing attackers from using pre-computed rainbow tables to crack them. Storing passwords correctly is honestly one of the most fundamental duties you have as a back-end developer. Getting it wrong is a recipe for disaster. Even with strong password policies, a single factor of authentication is often no longer enough. This is where multi-factor authentication, or MFA, comes in. MFA requires a user to provide 2 or more different types of credentials before they are granted access. This typically combines something they know, a password, with something they have, like a code from an authenticator app on their phone, or something they are, such as a fingerprint. Implementing MFA dramatically increases the security of user accounts. Even if an attacker steals a user's password, they still won't be able to log in without that second factor. You should strongly encourage or even require MFA for all users, especially for accounts with administrative privileges. Once a user is authenticated, you need to manage their sessions securely. This involves generating a strong, random, and unpredictable session identifier that is sent to the user's browser, usually as a cookie. This cookie must be configured with security attributes like HTTP only to prevent it from being accessed by client-side scripts, and secure to ensure it's only sent over HTTPS. Sessions should also have a reasonable timeout period, automatically logging the user out after a period of inactivity. This entire process, from login to logout, is part of secure session management, and it's critical for preventing attacks like session hijacking, where an attacker steals a valid session token and impersonates a legitimate user. Section 5. Watching the walls. Operational security and monitoring. You've built a secure application, but your job isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. Operational security is about the ongoing practices that keep your application secure once it's deployed. You can't just launch it and hope for the best. You need visibility into what's happening within your system at all times. This starts with comprehensive logging. Your application should log all significant events, user logins, both successful and failed, password changes, access to sensitive data, and any errors that occur. These logs are your digital crime scene evidence. Without them, you'll be flying blind if something goes wrong. Effective logs need to contain the right information. Each log entry should include a timestamp, the user or system responsible, the source IP address, and a clear description of what happened. However, be extremely careful not to log sensitive data like passwords, API keys, or full credit card numbers. Logs should be stored securely with strict access controls, so an attacker can't simply delete them. Many teams centralize their logs using platforms like the LK Stack or Splunk, which makes it easier to search and analyze data. With good logging in place, you can move on to monitoring and alerting. Monitoring is actively watching your logs and system metrics in real time to spot suspicious activity. You should set up automated alerts for events that could indicate an attack. For example, alerts for high numbers of failed logins from a single IP address or unusual geographic access patterns. These alerts allow your team to respond quickly to potential threats before they escalate into a breach. Proactive monitoring turns your logs from a passive record into an active defense mechanism. Finally, keeping everything up to date is a cornerstone of operational security. This means regularly applying security patches to your operating system, web server, database, and programming language runtime. Vulnerabilities are discovered all the time, and attackers are quick to exploit them. Using outdated software is like leaving your front door wide open. Use automated tools like Dependabot or Snike to scan for vulnerabilities and get notified when updates are needed. A consistent patching schedule is one of the most effective security measures. Section 6. Building a fortress. The secure development lifecycle. Security needs to be an integral part of your entire development process, from the first line of code to the final deployment and beyond. This is known as a secure development lifecycle, or SDLC. It begins with education and training. Every developer on your team needs to have a solid understanding of common security threats and best practices. They should be trained on how to write secure code, how to recognize potential vulnerabilities, and what the company's security policies are. A single developer who doesn't understand the risks of SQL injection can inadvertently create a hole that compromises the entire application. Continuous education is the first line of defense. The next step is securing your development environment itself. Your local machine, your code repository, and your testing environments are all potential targets. Use role-based access control, or RBAC, on your source code repository, like GitHub or GitLab, to ensure developers only have access to the code they need to work on. Protect your main branches, requiring code reviews and approvals before any changes can be merged. For accessing production infrastructure, developers should use secure channels like a virtual private network, or VPN, and access should be strictly controlled and logged. The principle of least privilege applies here just as much as it does in your application code. A critical part of a secure SDLC is regular code review. No developer is perfect and everyone makes mistakes. Having another set of eyes look over your code is an incredibly effective way to catch potential security flaws before they ever make it to production. Code reviews should have a specific focus on security. The reviewers should be actively looking for common vulnerabilities like injection flaws, improper error handling, or insecure handling of credentials. This peer review process not only improves the quality and security of the code, but also helps to share knowledge and reinforce a security-conscious culture across the team. It's a collaborative effort to build a more resilient product. To supplement manual reviews, you should integrate automated security tools into your development workflow. Static application security testing, or SAST, tools like SonarQube or Checkmarks, can be integrated directly into your CI/CD pipeline. These tools scan your source code for known vulnerability patterns and security hotspots without even running the application. They can automatically flag potential issues in pull requests, giving developers immediate feedback and preventing insecure code from being merged in the first place. Automating this process makes security a consistent and scalable part of your daily development routine rather than an afterthought. Section 7, Beyond the Code Network, API, and Database Security. While secure code is essential, your application doesn't exist in a vacuum. It runs on servers, communicates over networks, and relies on databases. Securing this surrounding infrastructure is just as important as securing the application code itself. Let's start with the network. Your servers should be housed in a segmented network. This means grouping servers with similar functions or security requirements into their own isolated subnets. For example, your public-facing web servers should be in a separate network segment, a DMZ or demilitarized zone, from your internal database servers. Firewalls should be configured to strictly control the traffic that can flow between these segments, only allowing necessary communication on specific ports. When it comes to your servers and databases, hardening is key. This means disabling any unnecessary services, applications, and network ports. Every open port is a potential entry point for an attacker. If your web server only needs to listen on ports 80 and 443, then all other ports should be blocked by a firewall. For your database, access should be restricted to only allow connections from your application server's specific IP addresses. You should never expose a database directly to the public internet. Furthermore, enforce encrypted connections between your application and your database to protect data in transit within your own network. Your APIs are another critical frontier. They are the public face of your backend logic. Every security principle we've discussed applies to them. You need strong authentication to control who can access the API, typically using API keys or, for more complex scenarios, an OAuth 2.0 flow. Implement rate limiting to prevent abuse and denial of service attacks. If an attacker can make thousands of requests per second, they can overwhelm your server or run up huge cloud bills. And of course, you must rigorously validate all input that comes into your API endpoints, just as you would with a traditional web application. An API is just another door into your system that needs a vigilant guard. Ultimately, building a secure backend is not about a single tool or technique. It is a continuous process of improvement and vigilance. It requires adopting a security-first mindset in everything you do. Think about potential threats during the design phase. Write defensive code. Review your peers' work with a critical eye. Use automation to catch mistakes. Monitor your systems in production. And most importantly, never stop learning. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, and as a developer, you have a professional and ethical responsibility to evolve with it. The security of your application, your company, and your users depends on it.